Okay, hello, ladies and gentlemen, for joining the session. We have Neale Hemrajani from Annapurna Interactive. It's a game publishing company behind some of the successful games like Outer Wilds, What Remains of Edith Finch, Donut County, Telling Lies, Journey, and a lot more. Neil, thank you very much for being a part of IGDC this year. It would be great if you can give quick background or an introduction about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me here. It's very exciting to be a part of this. I mean, I've always wanted to come to IGDC, and I think this year, with the pandemic, it made it possible to do it with doing it online. So it's really cool. Yeah, so as Level said, I'm a producer at Annapurna Interactive. I've been there pretty much from the beginning. I was initially a part of Annapurna Pictures, where I used to work in post production and work with a couple of different directors on like special projects in the creative sphere. And now, essentially, ever since Annapurna Interactive was formed, we've been working with the core team to kind of find developers that have something really interesting to say in the space. Also games that are very much kind of like not quite independent, not quite AAA, but somewhere in the middle, and also have like a sensibility that is kind of like taking what needs to be an interactive experience and an interactive story further. So we've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years. As Memo said, we've been putting out games like Outer Wilds, Edith Finch, that have been quite critically acclaimed in the circuit out there. And our goal is to just continue to support developers directly and kind of like clear the way so that they can do their creative best for the most part.
That's awesome. I mean, a lot of games from Annapurna are pretty narrative based, heavy storylines. Smaller games, not too deep AAA kind of bigger games, but narrative based games which keep people engaging. Now, I like we read about you a lot. You seem to have a great filmmaking background. How was your journey being like from that to making games or publishing games?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at first, I was born in India, and I first came here to LA to be a filmmaker. And I went to USC Film School, spent a lot of time, made some films. I actually ended up founding a company with some of my friends, and we made a lot of commercials, like TV pilots and all that good stuff. And filmmaking was definitely a great kind of like stepping stone because it kind of got me in the door with Annapurna Pictures, which was at the time making like like my favorite films that year, right? For example, they made Her that year, they made American Hustle, and it was just such a special company, and to be a part of it was great. I think the transition to games from filmmaking was easy and difficult in different ways. Difficult because obviously video games have like so much more. It's almost like when you're making a video game, you're building like the camera and you're building everything from the ground up before you start shooting, which was something that was um, not difficult, but like interesting to look at because also the timelines as we see are like almost like double as what it takes to make like a feature film, for instance. But what I realized when I was getting into it that a lot of the tenets that you have from a storytelling perspective, from a character perspective, from an idea of like what captures an audience is pretty much the same, regardless of what medium you're in. A lot of the stuff I learned about story kind of helps me now in terms of like working with developers on their stories. A lot of the things we learn about character also apply as well. At the end of the day, like storytelling as an art form has been around ever since people were around the campfire, like as cavemen. So, and it hasn't really. I mean, obviously, it's evolved a lot since then. But and I think the video game community has really helped like propel that even further. I think after spending a lot of time, like really like putting a lot of attention into like film and TV, and now coming to games, it's clear that the interactive space allows like a sense of subjectivity to stories that other ones don't. So it's a very very exciting place to be, and being able to like support like narrative developers in particular is really great.
Yeah, I know. I know. Like, it's not really important to have a background like this, which when you jump into making games which are narrative based or story based games, you don't need to especially have a great background into theaters or movie making. But I'm sure this because I was coming to this question. I'm sure that background would have definitely helped you what you're doing right now, and right. So um, does like do you have any major impact from that to this, like something that has really helped you, things that you learned over there, which you are using it right over here?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, like just from a general like screenwriting perspective, I mean, our developers are so talented in making stories. But then when it comes to actually writing them in the screenplay format and then working through like story structure and working through like acts, like there's a lot that translates over from filmmaking that can be useful to kind of like create like the bare bones of the story. But also like even past that, like a lot of our games are now like dabbling in like really interesting cinematography and editing styles. I think one game in particular that I want to mention is Last Stop by it's an upcoming game by a team called Variable State, and they made a game called Virginia about 4 years ago that we loved. And it basically brought in like the jump cut, which is traditionally a very well-known like filmmaking technique, and it made it a centerpiece of your game. And it was really great. Like it was something that you would not really see in the game, and it broke the language of like what you could do, but it worked really well for that game, and it obviously was very successful. And now I think for the next game, Last Stop, this one's a little bit more about cinematography. So this one's all about like how you can use the camera to tell a story, to really get into a character's head. And that definitely pulls from theater, that definitely pulls from cinema. And a lot of the team members from that development company are actually do have the background in those spheres. And one of them is actually a theater actor. So there's a lot that's kind of like there's a lot that you learn from other crafts that you can really bring into games, and then that's something that we really appreciated as well. For example, we try to bring in writers from the TV world to write some of our games, and they've had a really great time figuring out this new medium and working with the development teams as well. And then obviously, as we've announced recently, there's a lot of people from the film community, from an acting and talent perspective, that are now coming in and lending their voices to our games. So some of that comes from the relationship we have with the film side of our company, but some of that also comes from like speaking a certain language that actually makes sense to these actors, to these writers that are interested in doing something new in games, but don't quite know how to start. And we kind of like allow like we basically serve as the middle people to make sure that both sides can talk and collaborate and do something really cool.
It's pretty interesting, like a great profile to work in an environment with different kinds of roles connected to filmmaking as well as storytelling and stuff. So coming back, like coming to this very basic question, this could be very basic, but what has happened over the past few years is because we have tools like Unity. There are a lot of people who jump into making games. Solo developers, you can say
Yeah.
solo developers or a team of two or three, right? And it's pretty easy for these people now to make games, full-fledged games. So my question to you is, because the audience that we have right now watching this is a lot of people who are into game making already, who are game developers already, and people who want to get into this. So what I want to ask you is, can you just touch base on a simple process of game publishing? Like, what is a generic game publishing process, and what does the developer has to do to approach publishers?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to touch on what you said, in that, yeah, there are engines out there like Unity and Unreal that are making it very easy for small, like a team of one person or small teams to do things, and that is probably the coolest part of our industry right now. Like without a doubt, you have like voices from like all different stages of life, like dabbling, like wanting to tell stories that are very personal that aren't quite like AAA. And again, I want to caveat by saying like I love AAA games. I love games where you shoot people. It's like it's great. But I think for us as a publisher, what's been really exciting is like seeing voices from different parts of the world and different like telling stories that are not traditionally a part of the game space right now. Like I think somebody just put in the chat that they love Florence. And that's really great to hear, because Florence is, for all intents and purposes, like almost like a romantic comedy kind of game. And obviously it gets a little more heartfelt after that. And I think what's great about games like that is that it didn't really like you wouldn't associate that with being a game for the longest time. Like every time I try and like pitch Florence to someone so they can pick up and download it and give it a try. It's funny because they're like, sure, this is a game. I'm like, yeah, you should check it out. It's a game, and it's a beautiful, heartfelt experience that has like that obviously delves into like like what it means to go through your first love. But I think like circling back to your question for the publishing pathway, for us it's different for each publisher. I can speak to obviously how we do it. We come in at like any part of the process, right? So some games like Florence, it's basically come in from the very beginning where we had Ken Wong, who is obviously a great developer. He made Monument Valley, and we obviously like loved his work, and he was moving to Australia, and he wanted to like start a studio. So we basically started talking to him and like signed with him before he even built a studio, and then went through the process of like a couple different ideas before he landed on Florence, and then obviously like supported him to throughout making that game. However, that was one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is a game like Gorogoa, where essentially the whole game was playable start to finish when we came in, and we saw it in its entirety, and we were like, this is just amazing. This is possibly one of the most mind-bending games you've ever played. Now, what can we do to get Jake, the developer, to the finish line? Like doing the art pass, like getting the right music support for him, like the last, like the last like 20% of polish that really like kills people. we were able to make sure that to help out and like try and like clear the minefield so that he could ship that game on all those different platforms as well, right? So it's anywhere between that. So a pitch can really be in the form of back of the napkin, like, hey, I have this idea, I really want to come, I really believe in this, and let's find a way to like develop this into like a strong idea, like let's help put the pieces together. Or it can be like, I have this game, it's already almost ready, it needs like publishing support, like to kind of like bring to a level of polish and like and bring to a level of like where it's market ready, and then also and at that point obviously like getting it out into the market from like a marketing and like like platform perspective. So yeah.
Yeah, great. So this is a very specific question because to like because you have experience in publishing narrative-based games, right? Like story-driven games. I've been uh, I've been to conferences and to events where we pitched games, right? And multiple people with multiple kinds of games, like mobile games with a core loop. Is I think it's very easy for a mobile game with a core loop
Hmm.
to be pitched, and the publisher getting that sense of whether this thing will work or not, right?
Yeah.
But I've seen publishers taking totally different approach when it comes to story based games, because there's always a graph and a and I just wonder what is that key element that publishers take a look at when it comes to narrative games, because there's always a graph, right? The game definitely starts very slow
Yeah.
in a story based game, and it's 3 hours 4 hours kind of a game. What makes you, and I'm also sure that the developers might not be pitching you the whole game
Hmm.
when it's a publishing pitch. So what is it that makes you think that this game looks cool, or we should definitely.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say when it comes to the mobile games, it's great because I think this is the first time in our history where every single person has like a game console in their pocket, and especially really in India, right? Like there's such a huge mobile gaming community, and it's for the first time that you have a captive audience and you have the ability to like, be on people's screens, and they don't have to have an Xbox or a PlayStation or like a PC with like 50 graphics cards and stuff like that. Like you have all the gaming potential for all intents and purposes in a small form factor. So I think obviously there are tons of games like competing for your attention, and there are games that, like you said, that have a core loop that really like get people in, and uh, very often like I think for us we kind of like tend to premium games a little bit more because we want to be able to be respectful of people's time. And again, like, this is not saying that those games aren't respectful of people's time. It's just the audience that we are going for are kind of like looking for like short, like, tighter experiences that tell a full story or have like a full kind of like a full like creative experience in a short period of time, and it's finite, right? So for us, I would probably say that for mobile games like that, what we do look for is it's an art style that can probably grab you. I think Florence is a good example. Gorogoa is a good example. Donut County is another good example where it really like it almost like has like the creator's voice screaming off the page, and that's something that we look for right from the get go. Like if somebody is expressing a worldview, or someone is expressing a part of themselves, that is very clear to see. For Dona County, for example, you can see Ben Esposito all over that game. Like, if you met him, you would see like his, like the way that he kind of like treats life, and that inherent positivity that's what's inside him is very much in that game. Gorogoa, like Jake, is an extremely intelligent individual, and again, like you see a part of him in that game because there's so much complexity to it, and there's so much artistic beauty just from what you look at it as well. I think all those are determining factors, and I think it's a little hard to like quantify what that is. But when we play these games, sometimes it's very apparent that this is kind of furthering the interactive space by doing something really new, and also it can find an audience, in regardless of where you come from, regardless of what age you are, and like that. These are all kind of things that we look at for the most part. But at the end of the day, it's really like, do we identify, do we connect with the developer? Can we see that the developer is like, like mind somehow represented in this game? It's an intangible, and I'm sure, I mean, other publishers have other models as well, but for us, it's really about that relationship more than anything else.
Got it, got it. So it's not just the storyline, but it's also the uniqueness in terms of what. So you can't like just go ahead with a first person walking simulator and have a great story to it. But then again, if you're doing something very new, if you're doing something very unique that people have not experienced before, maybe that has much more chances of getting eyeballs, right? That's what
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think.
if you look at Gone Home, that is a walking simulator. That's one of the best like narrative experiences, like in first person. And I mean, that was again like Tangle located story in in one place, and Fulbright has obviously been on the map since then. And we're very excited that we were able to like bring Gone Home to other platforms as well. I mean, Edith Finch like was also another walking simulator, but we were like, all right, Gone Home exists. How do we now like do something that's different from Gone Home? Like, how do we up the ante? And I think when it came to Giant Sparrow, the developer for them, it was all. I think again, like the idea of like you playing like a pregnant like a pregnant girl going back and reliving the last 5 minutes of all of her like their dead family's lives. That felt something that was really there's something really cool in that. There's a lot of heart in that you're really experiencing the connection to each of them and what family means in the face of mortality. So yeah, I mean, again, Edith Finch is a bad example because again, it was a masterpiece before we even like came in and touched it. But when it comes to the games that we see, like again, like you can. It's again I think going back to what we said before, like there's so many like new voices coming in because of what these engines are like being able to like show that it's exciting to see like something that kind of like shocks you and stuns you, and you be like, wow, I didn't anticipate that story to be something that we represented in this format. And we like, I mean, we're very much fans of games ourselves. We like to be surprised, we like to be shocked, and we like to be thrilled by some of these story ideas.
So when you coming back to this Edith Finch, right? I must say, spoiler alert, but the last 5 minutes of the game just got me goosebumps through. It was great, like the complete experience of playing that game. The last 5 minutes was utmost satisfactory of what I did for the first 3 4 hours. I think that is one of the key element of almost all the Annapurna games that you've been publishing. You specifically look for those things. When it comes to pitching, right? When people pitch you games, that's just one way of finding a game. But do you guys also hunt for games? Like when you are on social media or you see some games out there which are under development, do you guys also hunt those games and talk to the developers, or whether do you make decisions like that also?
Yeah, we're absolutely constantly looking for the most part. As the team grows, like we definitely want to find a way, especially international projects, right? Like find like the the independent gaming community is fairly small, is what I found. Like, and when coming from film, where it's such a vast community, like coming to these basically like the GDC events and so forth, you would see a lot of the same people around, and it's an extremely talented pool. But we're always like on the lookout for like expanding that, finding people that are that again like coming into the space for the first time. I think a good example is The Artful Escape, which is a game that we're publishing on Xbox. Um, it was a game that was essentially doing a crowdfunding piece, and one of our producers found it, and we were like, this is amazing. Unfortunately, it didn't end up getting crowdfunding, but we immediately called the developer right after, and he's actually a rock star that opened for Def Leppard. So that's like someone who's completely removed from the game community, but had this amazing vision and this amazing art style and the story. So that was one that I think we reached out to and we found ourselves. But I think a big part of it, as well as for us working with teams again and again, we want to build long-term relationships, not short-term ones. So we try as much as possible to like work with people constantly, like after they're done with the last game, like kind of like figuring out like what the next step is for their development team, and like making sure that they can get to a place where they can like like take only up like to the next level of what they want to do essentially.
Yeah, cool. So before I proceed, I just want to jump into a couple of questions quickly. Um, a lot of like people have already said it's the Florence. Like people are fan of the game Florence. Imtiaz wants to ask whether we are coming up with Florence 2 anytime soon.
Why not? Yes. How you doing, man? No Florence too, unfortunately. It feels like it was a finite experience. It was that chapter of her life. Unfortunately, that's closed now.
Okay, so Karthik wants to ask you: are there any metrics that you guys take a look at? I know, like it's when it's premium, um, you really don't do these soft launches. I mean, to test the numbers, right? Because it's premium, and we just. But do you guys also have some like any hidden metrics or whatever things that you take a look at before jumping?
I mean, we definitely analyze everything we have to our disposal. A lot of the platforms are really great in terms of reporting data and providing trends and so forth. Steam kind of, I'm sure most of you who've developed on Steam and self-published have seen like the powerful metrics that they have. But we also try to find our audience in real life when outside the apocalypse, of course, where when we go to PAX and some of these events, we try to engage with our fans as much as possible, try and get an idea for what's working, what's not, like how people are receiving it. And then also like a lot of engagement online with our social media platforms. So we do have ways to kind of like look into some of those metrics and find ways to build that audience and make sure that our games get to more people. A big part of that, of course, is working with the platforms and making sure that they can, and having like really tight relationships with them so that they're happy with the content that we're feeding them, and we're happy with the kind of like positioning and data that we're receiving as well.
I recently played Telling Lies, and
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like a movie. It's actually a movie. It's an interactive movie itself, right? Uh, but it gives me a clear picture that you guys are just taking it to the next level when it comes to production quality as well, right? And it's like making a movie itself. Now, this all process might be very very I just want to understand how does like how has the pandemic affected this production? Because I think every game you might be doing these kind of things, which final output is what we see, right? It's just brilliant. How has pandemic affected that?
In very unique ways, I'd probably say. For one, our whole team is no longer together. We're on Zoom conferences, and our team really loves each other. Like over the course of the last 5 years, we really built a family, and we love being in the same space and joking with each other and like helping each other and just being collaborative as much as we can. And unfortunately, this pandemic has taken that away temporarily. Um, I think what's cool about our industry, what puts us in a unique position, is that I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are realizing this, is a ton of it can be done remotely. A ton of it can be done by not being in the same room. In general, this is a technically sound industry in terms of like being able to do everything that's kind of located online, and I think that we're an advantage for that part. While other industries have really struggled to like find a footing and continue doing their creative pursuits, we've been able to continue forward with relationships by like being on Skype, like whether it's taking pictures on Skype all the way to like having our check-ins our weekly or bi-weekly check-ins on Zoom, and making sure that we can stay in tight contact with. And again, I think platforms like Slack and so forth have really helped that even more. When it comes to making games, it's been busy because I think everyone hasn't stopped. It's almost like a lot of people to focus in and really like hone in their craft and do what they feel, like do their best and create these amazing projects, and for us to like try and support as much as possible online. There have been a few times where that have been challenging. For example, one of our games had like had a voiceover session that we were supposed to do with some pretty high profile talent, that we were supposed to fly into LA and do all this together. And we've done a lot of those sessions in the past, and they've been really great when you're in the same room. Obviously, we weren't able to do that this time, and we had to ship the game on time. So what we essentially did like remote sessions of one of the actors was in London, one of the actors was in Rome, our director was in San Francisco, I was here in LA, and essentially had like long, like 4 to 6 hour sessions where all you're doing is looking at the screen and hearing the audio feed that's piped in, trying to provide direction, trying to like figure out like how to create a connection with someone who's like hundreds of thousands of miles away. And I think that was a challenge that we had, but also something that was really cool. It's actually a behind the scenes video about it. If any of you are interested, it's a game called 12 Minutes that's coming pretty soon. And if you just Google 12 Minutes behind the scenes, you will see an insight into the process of like how you can run a voiceover session completely remotely and also safely given the times right now.
That's pretty difficult, it seems, because not being together and doing all these sessions. But I think everybody has just adapted to this situation, and it's kind of a new experience for everybody. Yeah. So the can you just again like touch base on few pointers that you think indie developers should do, and should just avoid doing while pitching it to the publishers?
I mean, I think this might be a little cliche, but it really bears repeating. Try and make the most personal games that you can. I mean, at the end of the day, like your experience in life, where you come from, like what you did, like the people you love, the people that you hate, and if that's what rings your bell, like the people that surround you and the circumstances that make you you are the most interesting asset that you have available to you. So I would definitely recommend that you make games that are extremely personal, that mean a lot to you. That's something that you can get behind for the greater part of 3 years and really still be invested in it and not want to pull your hair out. And not really make games that you feel that a publisher would like, or this would fit that publisher, and this feels like kind of in line with the games they're making. This is something that I feel will get me through the door. Forget about all of that. Just focus on prototyping and trying things out that really make you feel like you're somebody that this is something that's nourishing your soul essentially, and that's something that will show up on that will show up on the pitch, and that will show up in the game eventually as well. Um, and also try a lot of different things. Like when you have the ability to like prototype a lot of things with small teams now, try and figure out as much as you can with the smallest team possible without expanding your teams and going through a lot of burn rate, just because it will allow you like the creative ability to like really like to spend the time you need to do it without the stress and the pressure of like having a big team. So as much as you can, if you have an idea, just work in small teams or just by yourself and prototype different things until you feel like something is ready for like new eyes or new people to come in.
Yeah, so you definitely it looks like you definitely don't need to push really hard. Like even if you have prototypes, demos, you can go ahead and publish. Pitch it to the publishers. At least for the feedback or whatever. There's always a learning. If it's not selected, you always get to learn a lot from the publishers itself. What is right and what is wrong in the game, right? So I just wanted to understand, in terms of like specifically Annapurna Interactive, what do you guys provide supporting? Like, because I'm sure, like we last time we spoke about having expertise in terms of storytelling as well, localization stuff, which is again very important to reach out to a lot more people, right?
Yeah.
So what are the kind of support that you provide to the developers?
Sure, absolutely. So I think the first line of publishing obviously is those services like quality assurance, localization, marketing. But we also finance our games. So we make sure that the development team is covered in terms of like a we work very closely to actually build out the budget and schedule with them and kind of like work with them throughout the project. We are a little unconventional is that we don't quite work so much in milestones, but a little as much as we do in terms of like being like total partners with our developers. So essentially like the equivalent is like being a producer on a film where you like really like this is something that we're a part of we're part of this with you. We're not somebody you answer to. We're definitely like close collaborators from both the production level, from a publishing level, as and some and off, I mean often a creative level as well. So if anybody has a stumbling block in terms of like I'm not quite being able to figure out the story, I'm not able to figure out this character, we will step in and help out, whether it is bringing in external resources in the form of a writer or working directly with them. Again, like I think something that I keep saying, but it's really true, is like it's like our job is to be a minesweeper, is to like really clear the minefield so that the developer can really focus in and do like his or her like creative best. Like if the developer is really focusing only on creativity, we're doing our jobs correctly. So as much as possible, like through our production, we try to be like like tight partners to make sure like what we can do to kind of get rid of like all the problems or like like the administrative stuff that could sometimes get in the way. But when the game's done, obviously we work with the platforms to make sure that we can find the right kind of like positioning for it. Make sure the game is coming out on the right platforms, on PC, on console, and mobile, like what's appropriate for it, and then marketing it to that appropriate audience as well. Like each of our games is a little different. A lot very different actually. So each of them have like a unique audience, like a core audience for the most part. So it's our job to find that audience and make sure that the game gets to them, and then also make sure that the developers being nourished throughout the process, right? Um, yeah, that's I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah, I think that's pretty important also, because I think not every set of developers have all kinds of expertise, right? And a lot of good developers that even I have been like fortunate enough to work with, they are good at developing games, but when it comes to the 360 of it, right, like just like you mentioned about publishing or promoting the game, or getting to the consoles, talking to the console teams, reaching out to people, letting them know that the game is coming out soon and stuff like that. I think then uh, developers should not really worry about having expertise on all the aspects. But if you have good game which has potential that you think, I think they should just collaborate with the publishers, because they really support in many ways, and not just giving you the upfront money, or the revenue
yeah.
share kind of a thing. Coming back to this also, like there's one question related to the same topic that I'm talking about is, um, I just read one thing is, how do like there's a question which says, if I'm a solo developer, an indie developer, um, can I collaborate with Annapurna? If I do I have to worry about having a big team? Because I spoke to guys at Mountains last to last year when we were at GDC, for Florence, like during Florence, and as far as I remember, even they had a very small team.
Mhm.
Um, so does that affect? Do you really have to have a good team, or just a single solo developer can also connect with you guys and collaborate?
I think absolutely. Like a developer who's like solo can collaborate with us for mountains, as you mentioned. We started that by just talking to Ken before he built out his team. So it was just Ken Wong at the time. Same with Jake for Gorogoa. Same with Ben for Dona County and Luis for 12 Minutes. All these basically came to us at the stage where they were either solo working with a couple of contractors, or or at the very like nascent stage of their idea. So it's absolutely it's absolutely something that we've done in the past, and we don't have a stigma against it for it. Like it's very much like, if the idea is sound, is it something that we can tell that the create like a part of the creator is in it, and also something that we believe that can go like the full mile for them.
Yeah, which is very true. There's I want to take a question from Chirag. Since you guys are really fond of premium experiences, how is it working for you guys? That's one. Do you suggest others to follow the premium experiences with or without a publisher at this age of stupid F2P? If yes, do you have some tips for someone interested?
I'm really glad that you're interested in the premium model. We really believe in it. There's a lot of channels now that are available for it. Obviously, Apple Arcade being one. That is basically a service that just came out, especially for premium games. I think platforms in general are very excited about premium games because it showcases their technology at least from like a visual fidelity perspective. So there are a lot of like platform holders that are very keen for these kind of experiences in general. Um, it is obviously a mixed bag, right? Because again, like standing out in like a sea of apps is really hard. So I'd definitely say that with a publisher, you have the ability to at least like have like a strong platform relationship so that you can be featured and make sure that you can like rise above like the tide as much as possible. Another great tool to you is like engaging with a lot of like there's so much gaming press out there now that are really excited about these experiences and feel strongly about it. So engaging with them as well to make sure that they can have an early look at your builds, like like have the ability to like really put it out there as much as possible would be great. But I would definitely say like when it comes to mobile, at least it feels like a different model from console and PC, just in that there's just so much that you have to like sift through to like stand out. So would definitely recommend if you are thinking of making a premium game, try and get in touch with platform representatives, either Google or Apple, to try and get as much as possible. If you're not working with a publisher, if you are working with a publisher, you want to make sure that that publisher has strong relationships and has a good history of like putting our premium games that have risen above like the tide and make sure that they've been visible for the most part.
Like we are also in India, we've been seeing a lot of premium games coming up in the past 2 years. I think uh, most of us have shifted their interests from F2P to premium because of a lot of help which is already out there, like platforms like just the thing that you mentioned, right? Apple Arcade. Couple of the developers from India got featured on Apple Arcade, which is a great news for the development community as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a new route that people are taking. It was a bit riskier earlier, I
Mhm.
think, because there was not much of scope for independent developers out there. But now, because the publishers are very open to the ideas and experimentation and the platform's support, I think
Mhm.
it's great. One question that I have is. Where is this? I just missed it. Hold on. Which skills translate easily from film, TV to games, and which skills don't? I would assume writing and music translate easily, and direction might be tougher.
No, actually, I'd probably say like it really depends on the type of game, right? Because if you look at Telling Lies, in that case, Sam Barlow is. I keep saying that he would probably make an amazing film or TV director as well, just because he really knows how to like work with the camera and work with actors and bring the vision from the page to the screen, and that's completely live action. So I'll definitely say that in that case, direction from like screen directing was a very useful quality. It really depends, but I feel like at the end of the day, like most film directors and TV directors are trained to like tell a story really well and work with personnel to make that happen. And making sure that they can guide a team towards like a single goal to make something like that happen. So I would definitely say that directing in general, if you're a good director somewhere else, as long as you're open to the new experiences, as long as you're not carrying forward your baggage of like, this is the way it's done and this is the way like it has to work in film, you will be successful in the interactive format by bringing in some of those skill sets. Similarly, like cinematography, like editing, like sound, music, anything in the creative pursuit, like if you're doing that, all of that can be translated. For the longest time, people said that editing from film is just like not applicable to games. But again, as I mentioned with Virginia, it showed like how they took like the jump cut and made it like a feature piece in one of their games, right? So it depends on like how creative you're willing to be to like take some of those skill sets and apply them to games and like and making sure that they're applicable to a gameplay experience. But I'd say like if any of those skills are never lost, and so and vice versa. If you have game making experience, you are uniquely suited to tell a subjective experience in some of these other kind of like areas like film or TV. Like you will have something that other like film directors don't. So it's just what's great about our time right now is all it's becoming so interchangeable, right? I mean, you have Bandersnatch on Netflix, which is basically like a choose your own adventure game that's now on like a major like film and TV platform. So I think what we will be seeing in the course of the next 5 or 10 years is like a serious confluence of all these different types of media. Because at the end of the day, like none of these things like it's. I mean, obviously now especially like with theaters being shut down, like the idea of like sitting in front of a screen and having a passive experience is very rare. More often than not, you're watching on your phone, you're watching on your computer, and it's interactive. Like you're commenting, like you right now as you're listening to me, you're commenting, right? Like we're having a conversation, and I think media in general is turning towards like being more of a conversation, and games in general are the most suited to be that because for the most part, as you are playing your games and going through a story, you're having a conversation with the developer, with the creator, with the characters by like inserting a part of yourself into it. So um, I just think like skill sets in any of these dimensions are going to be like it's going to be
You,
extremely like
yeah, yeah, totally. A couple of quick questions. One from Harish. He says, "Does Annapurna help with getting developer kits in the hands of the dev because it's tricky having it in India?" So, um,
We do. Yes, we work with the platforms to make sure that all of our developers get their kits in an appropriate fashion.
but that also takes place at your end, right? I mean, you also have like proper support if people, don't have enough experience to port their games to consoles. You
Yeah.
guys come in and do that, right, for the developers?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If a developer is unfamiliar with the platform, we'll either work with an external porting team, or we'll embed like a person within their team that can kind of like help level them up as well. But yeah, I think anytime like we're looking at other platforms, like bringing the game to like more audiences, we play a very like strong role in that.
Cool. Um, so Chirag wants to know, did Journey or Flower touch the right souls on mobile like they did on PlayStation?
Um, you mean the cell units or? I think again, I think there were a lot of people that love Journey and so forth that basically would. There's so many people that were outside the PlayStation audience that we felt that the game could really like touch and make sure that they could actually have the same effect as they did. So we were excited that Sony gave us the opportunity to put it out on mobile just because it just opened up like the scale of the players that could experience the game. Like obviously Sony was a huge part in like bringing the game to people in the first place, and I think they understood that this is a game that would benefit from having an expanded audience on a mobile platform. So for the most part, I think our job was to get it to more people, and they did that. So it was
So
happy. We were
looks
happy.
like yeah, looks like it did.
Yeah, and because actually, Chirag just put in like a follow up question. Um, I think for us, like the kind of people that would download Journey or Flower, we're looking for that specific kind of experience, or had heard about it before, just because they're so legendary in the space. So I don't think we received any kind of like negative feedback or any kind of like negative reviews or anything. At least till now, we haven't received any kind of like feedback that's been like, why did you make this game to this audience, or like this is kind of boring or so forth. It was very much like the same pool of people that we knew that the game would have a positive effect on.
Um, Ashwant has a very interesting question here. When you collaborated with Heart Machine, who already had a first hit in Hyperlight Drifter, What was your expectation? Is the creative freedom with established devs same with the new interest? Very, very interesting question.
Yeah, it is a great question. So obviously, Hyper Drifter is a masterpiece, and Heart Machine is an amazing like experience studio. But I think regardless of like where you are in this field, like whether it's your first project or whether it's coming off like a big hit like that, we like to have the same kind of like relationship of trust and like, the collaboration with our teams. So our goal is never to impose a creative kind of like mandate, like you need to make this kind of game, this is the way it's supposed to go. We would never do that, even with a first time director or developer. Our goal is like as much as possible try and like guide the process as much as we can and like try to help you achieve your goal. So I think from a creative freedom perspective, I would probably say that our developers are extremely free to like investigate any angle that they want, but at the same time we like to have like a collaborative, we want to be in this with you. We want to be able to feel like we're part of this process. Like, we're helping you from like, essentially we're a team member for you and we're a resource for you. And at the same time, like, as it is in the case with some team members, there might be some things that we need to have conversations about and be like, hey, well, this feels like it's not quite like, achieving your goal in the next direction and so forth. And to the credit of our developers, like those conversations have been extremely easy just because we set it up front that we're here to like be in this together. We're basically in the trenches together, and let's find a way to like let's figure out what your goal is, and your goal can change. Like throughout the whole process, like your goals might be shifting, but let's at the same time like being together. So it's creative freedom with collaboration is the way I would probably title it.
Yeah, talking about the goals, right? I was curious to understand what is Annapurna like. What is Annapurna's motto? I mean, see, when we see games from the portfolio of Annapurna, it's like they're pretty solid games, but they're not bigger games. Do you guys anytime soon you guys would jump onto the bigger games, or is it the path that you want to continue? What is the end goal?
I think very much like Annapurna Pictures, our goal is never going to change. It's basically to support like unique creator driven content. Um, at the end of the day, that's by far what's most important to us. Like games that come from creators and like have a lot of like have a sense of soul to them, and it's in some way kind of like adding to the pool of like interactive content, like find furthering the craft of like what an interactive like piece looks like. I think that I know that's kind of like incongruous and not quite it's not quite defined, but it's hard to say. If you look at all of my games, you'll probably see like why. It's because Florence is not like due process, and at the same time, telling lies is not like 12 minutes. So for us, it's all about like supporting creators that are like looking to do interesting things. Is kind of our motto and what we'll always do, regardless of like what the size of the game will be.
Pretty awesome. So before we wrap up, I just have one question. Do you have because all the games, most of the games I've played, definitely because it's made and because it works the other way around for me. If it's made by Annapurna, I'm definitely going to play it. That's the approach that I have. Do you have any quick story to tell about any game that you worked on with Annapurna? Anything that you learned, which which is very interesting for the audience to know.
I mean, the story I usually like to go through is like what we did during the pandemic, and essentially like working with developers from around the world that were going through like obviously like personal and professional struggles with the pandemic, but at the end of the day, like forming a community together. A big part of that was making sure that we can be in touch, be in contact, and kind of like support each other. I've had developers support me through like tough times, and I think as much as possible as you can insert yourselves into and really like help nurture both sides. That's really the best way to do it. From a story perspective, I was gonna go with the one that I just said, which was about like how we were able to like bring in all these actors in different places and different times. And at the end of the day, everyone was just driven to the same goal, so that we were able to do it, even though we were like like in different continents as much as possible. But I'm just saying that I probably say end by saying that this, especially at this time where we're like kind of like confined to our rooms and so forth, it's never been more important to connect with each other. And one great way to connect with each other is by working on something that you really believe in. and doing it like, with people that you really love working with. So I would just say like work with the people you love working with that kind of feel like they inspire and nourish you, and make games that you feel like connect you to the rest of the world. So as long as you do that, publishers will line up to work with you. Yeah.
Awesome. Any last piece of advice for indie developers who are watching this?
I mean, I'd say that just take advantage of all the resources you can with Unity, Unreal. Just try and prototype stuff with small teams, and yeah, I mean, like just again, do stuff that's personally like that shows a part of you, and not it's not something that mimics something else, but that's something that's uniquely like what makes you you.
Great. Super amazing. Neale, once again, thanks a lot for being a part of IGDC.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everyone like coming in and listening to me talk for a long this time. And thank you, Matt. I really appreciate your questions. So thanks for letting me be a part of this. And this is a really great show. And all your whole team has done such a great job putting this together in the face of not being able to be in the same place.
All right. Thanks a lot. If you guys have anything, any questions, you can connect with Neale. He's on LinkedIn. So just get in touch with Neale. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody who has joined this session. Thanks a lot, Neale.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's exit the panel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take care.
Yeah.